It's a real honor to be with you today, and how appropriate to be in a shrine, because for those of the women I take care of who are religious, they've taught me a lot, and one of the things that they taught me was that their body is a shrine, and it is a gift from your parents and whoever spiritual maker you have, but it becomes your responsibility to protect and cherish your gift. And part of that is protecting your breast health and reducing the risk of breast cancer over a lifetime. I'm here with you today as president and founder of breastcancer.org. I'm also a practicing oncologist in the Philadelphia area for over 20 years. I'm a mom with 3 children. One of my offspring, Isabel, is here today. And then 2 years ago, I had my own breast cancer experience, so I'm sort of the dual citizen, the doctor and the patient, which really was quite humbling. And most of the time, I'm working in a hospital, no natural light, wearing a white coat, seeing patients all day long. And it wasn't all that long ago that I thought to myself, with one more patient diagnosed, you open the door and you see one more individual affected by this disease, and you think, damn, couldn't we have just figured out how to prevent this from ever happening? And as it turns out, breast cancer is the most common cancer to affect women. When you look at what's at stake, there are over 400 million women and girls in the world. 1 in 8 is projected to get breast cancer in the course of her lifetime. That turns out to be, a huge number. And actually, I'll start that again because the accurate numbers are globally there are over 3 billion women and girls. And if you calculate 1 in 8 at a global level, that works out to be 400 million. So there's clearly a lot at stake. And when you look at the United States alone, how many people are affected, about 29% of all cancers to affect women are breast cancers. The next most common is about half, lung cancer, 14%, colorectal is about 9%, and everything falls well below that. So there's something going on, something very unusual about the breast that makes it so disproportionately affected by breast cancer, than any other organ. And it didn't used to be like that. Breast cancer used to be an uncommon disease 50 to 100 years ago. And so breastcancer.org, my nonprofit organization, together with Harvard Medical School, decided about 4 years ago to ask the question, why is the breast, why has it become the favorite place for cancer to occur in a woman's body? And how can we use those insights to help reduce the incidence of this dreaded disease? Knowing that only 10% of breast cancers are related to one of those genes like BRCA1 and BRCA2 that produces a high risk. 90% of breast cancers are not due to one of those inherited genes. It's due primarily to the interaction between the inside environment of the breast and the outside environment. And the whole logo that we use to talk about prevention at breastcancer.org is the Think Pink, Live Green logo, where the pink represents the inside environment, the green represents the outside environment. And whenever we, eat, drink, breathe in, take in substances and different products, that can affect how your inside environment runs, operates, how your cells are built. So in terms of the research findings through the collaboration between breastcancer.org and Harvard Medical School, we pretty quickly discovered 2 main reasons why the breast is so disproportionately affected by breast cancer. And those, again, give us clues to what we can do to reduce our risk. So the first thing is the breast gland is inherently much more vulnerable to the development of cancer. It is an organ that takes way, way longer to build than all of your other organs. When you think about it, if you're in utero growing as an embryo, then a fetus, and then a baby, the first 3 months of pregnancy, that's when all of your organs are built. And whenever you're building an organ, It's a very delicate process. And if an error occurs, the gene may not work properly to grow in a normal fashion. So during those first 3 months of pregnancy, women who are pregnant know to be very careful, very good, don't drink, don't use drugs, sleep well, take care of yourself because you're building this baby, right? But for the breast gland, during pregnancy, only the nipple and the areola are made, and a teeny seed is planted under the surface. It's not until years later, adolescence, for a 10-year chunk of time, 8 to 18 into the early 20s, that the breast gland is being made, during which time it's very delicate, and any insult could lead to a problem that later in life increases the risk of breast cancer. Like, for example, we know from nuclear power plant disasters and atomic bomb, fallouts, that it is exposure to girls during their adolescent years when an insult could occur to the breast gland that would produce a higher risk of breast cancer way later in life. But what's fascinating about the breast, as I said, is that it takes that long to build it. And compare that to your other organs, the heart is beating, or is built and is beating like in the second trimester of pregnancy. The baby starts to kick you around that time. That means the bones and the muscles and the nerves are working. The baby's drinking and peeing during the pregnancy. The baby's born and then can take her first breath. Now the lungs are working. But the breast doesn't get to be built fully until adolescence, into your early 20s. And even when it's formed, the cells on the inside are immature, and they're very overactive and highly suggestible. They're not yet able to do their job, which is to make milk. So they're kind of hanging out, kind of fooling around, and they are very, ready for action, ready to fool around with a whole lot of things out in the environment that may look like, smell like, taste like, act like estrogen to a breast cell, because the breast cell was sort of built and made to have a relationship, monogamous relationship with estrogen. But the reality is that the immature breast gland can end up fooling around with a lot of other chemicals. So that's a short story about why the breast gland is inherently more vulnerable to cancer than other organs, because the long period of time during which it is being made, and the length of time that the breast organ is immature until the first full-term pregnancy, when the breast gland finally is forced to grow up, mature, get a job, getting milk. And so it is not until that time in a woman's life when the breast gland is fully matured and more resistant to getting into trouble. So that is sort of the backdrop. And then the other reason why the breast cancers become so common is modern life today is more dangerous. So just explain give you a few examples, and that will lead to a very interactive conversation about what you can do today and tomorrow moving forward to reduce your risk. So just, you know very well about how modern life is different. So the obesity epidemic, for one, the extra fat makes extra hormones, which can lead to extra breast cell growth, as well as inflammation to sort of wear down the immune system, making the breast cells more at risk. The extra fat also is a storage unit for chemicals in the environment that dissolve in fat. A lot of the hormones in food or the pesticides and things like that, those chemicals actually dissolve in fat, and your body can retain them that way. It's also true that people who are heavy, and you're aware of the obesity epidemic, they are less likely to be physically active and more likely to eat foods that are unhealthy. So another few examples about modern life today that's different from before, helping us understand what has changed so substantially. So there is early puberty, where it used to happen around age 17, around 1800, around age 14, 1900. Today, it happens around age 9 or 10. So that means that the breast glands have formed and are ready for action way earlier than they ever used to be. It's also true about modern life that many of us are postponing our first full-term pregnancy or never having one, or not breastfeeding. So that means that's going to postpone the time when the breast gland is finally made to grow up, to get a job, get disciplined, stop getting into trouble. And if you start your puberty real early and you don't get your first full-term pregnancy to way late, that's many more years where the breast gland is sort of like waiting for action and could get into trouble. It is also true that where a lot of us are using hormones that we never were using before. So many women are still using hormone replacement therapy after menopause, and we've got very large numbers of women taking birth control pills for decades, which may be associated with an elevated risk if you're taking it for decades. And finally, the outside environment used to be much cleaner than it is today. We now have, pesticides that are used in many of our foods. Atrazine, for example, used to grow corn, can actually stimulate extra hormone effects inside of your body. It's also true that we're using plastics. For example, bisphenol A, BPA, you've heard about that. It's used to soften, make plastic more resilient. That has an estrogenic effect, and it's used, in hard water bottles. The number 7 water bottle, that upside-down water bottle back there has BPA in it. It's also used in the lining of food cans, in the resin to protect your food from the metal taste of the can. And we also have, other types of chemicals that didn't used to be there, like flame retardants that are in blankets, children's pajamas, in mattresses, in drapery, in upholstery, and rugs by requirement, by law today, just to protect people from the higher incidence of fires, particularly in areas where it's very dry. So all of these, as you know, what comes around goes around. And these chemicals that get into the water supply and get into the food we eat go up the food chain. So there's a phenomenon called bioaccumulation, where chemicals sort of, as they go up the food chain, they concentrate. So who's at the top of the food chain are people, and who's at the tippy top? It's the baby in utero or the baby that's breastfeeding. She is on the very, very tippy top of the food chain and is going to get the highest dose, concentration of the chemicals that we're concerned about. So moving forward, this sounds like, oh my God, we've got this huge problem, and what can little old me do about this big problem? Well, as it turns out, the body is very forgiving. And we do have a tremendous capacity to heal, forgive, and move forward. But it does require that we kind of relook at how we lead our lives, what we're eating, what we're drinking, what we're breathing in, the medicines and supplements that we're using, how we use our bodies, how physically active we are, how we manage our stress, our weight, and just sort of the whole interaction between the outside and inside environment. And so the opportunity to promote breast health and reduce the risk of breast cancer has a very broad appeal, broad impact. So it means if you've never had breast cancer, we would hope that you'd never develop it. What can you do to reduce the risk of that happening, getting breast cancer? If you've had breast cancer, you never want to see it again. So how do you reduce the risk of recurrence? Prevention is relevant to that. It also is important in terms of sparing the next generation, because what we do as mothers and fathers impacts our daughter's risk. So, for example, there were women who took a medicine during pregnancy that meant that their daughters had a higher risk of breast cancer way later in life. If we're physically active as mothers, our daughters are more likely to lead, follow from our example. We lead by example. And that's true with sort of how you're eating, how you're drinking. If you're a smoker, if you're a drinker, all of those things can have an impact on your daughter's risk moving forward. So what I thought we would do today would be a chance to sort of answer questions, and by answering those questions, we can sort of address the opportunities that you have in your everyday life to reduce your risk, because it is true that changing your life today can lower your risk tomorrow. And at breastcancer.org, by the way, we're the #1 online resource in the world for breast health, breast cancer. We have 12 million people that depend on us for all of our content. It could be about, diagnosis, prevention, moving beyond recurrence, all realms of treatment, as well as research news every day, and an incredibly active community where people connect with each other and share personal expertise. And I also have a blog called Think Pink, Live Green, where we look at various practical things about your everyday life that will help reduce your risk, like, if you want to go for a manicure, how do you get the safest one? If you're using sunscreen, how do you choose a product? If it's about tampons or panty liners, or if it's about what kind of produce to buy and how do you select the healthiest types. We have all that information at breastcancer.org within the Think Pink, Live Green section. And the organization is in the strategic mode right now to plan a global movement about prevention, because we haven't had a movement in this country about prevention. It's been about the cure. The assumption is if you have it, how do you be cured of it and hopefully never have another encounter? And we believe that prevention actually is the best cure, that an ounce of prevention is worth way more than a pound of cure, and so many more lives can be saved and loved ones' lives spared, because when any of us are diagnosed, we might be counted in the numbers, but no one starts counting, our kids or the people who depend on us. In my situation, I have a very big medical practice, and then the 12 million at breastcancer.org and my great team who's here today, and that's just me. Everybody who's in that statistic has a whole world that's affected when a diagnosis strikes. And so we are really excited about the opportunity of launching the national then global movement about prevention, and we believe we're in the best position to do that, since we've really learned to harness the power of technology to reach people, and using social media to have a movement, a modern movement, in a way that's never been seen before, different from, like, say, smoking and lung cancer, or HPV and cervical cancer, those movements that were built primarily before social media really was an active, important tool. So what I'd like to do is sort of go around the room and answer any questions that may be coming up. You want to ask a question? What you asked me before?
Hi. I was wondering what recommendations you have for what type of deodorant to use, and also just skincare and beauty care products, what to stay away from and what to lean towards.
Okay, well, thank you. So, it's really interesting. People have now come to understand that what goes on you goes in you. And it wasn't until there were medications that were administered through a patch, like a little spot of a medicine under a patch, was enough to get blood levels of that medicine to have an effect that you are seeking. So if that's true, imagine what happens when you cover your body with sunscreen or a moisturizer or a product like that. So there's no question that what goes on you goes in you. So if it's a question of a moisturizer, I think keeping it simple is best. And one thing that a lot of people I take care of like to use is organic coconut oil. It's a thin oil. It's food grade, which it should be since it's going inside your body. You can buy little amounts of it, and it doesn't really smell like coconuts. You're not going to smell like a pina colada afterwards or anything like that. And you can put it on, particularly before you go to sleep at night, and then wear like a T-shirt or whatever, because eventually we'll get on the bedclothes, but even if you wash your sheets every 2 weeks or so, you're fine. But your skin will drink it. If there's a personal care product that you are using presently and you like it and you want to see if it's safe or not, you can go to Safe Cosmetics, or the plural, .org. The Environmental Working Group also has a consumer product database where you can check out the products that you're using. Not everything is on the list, but it's pretty comprehensive. In general, you want to look for products that are fragrance-free and without preservatives. The parabens, that is a preservative, is one of those chemicals that people are worried about. So too are the fragrances, the phthalates, which seem to have a hormonal action. And so that is something to look out for. And we have on our blog, a whole, feature about sunscreens, which are important to use. Now, you would also ask about deodorants. So a lot of myths are out there about antiperspirants, deodorants increasing the risk of breast cancer. And in fact, there's no hard data that proves that. But I understand sort of why people would be, concerned about something that you're putting on your body that may be trapping something that's trying to get out. And so just so you know, you've got your ability to sweat is all over. It's not confined to your armpit. So if something has to get out, it will get out in a number of ways, through sweat, through peeing, pooping, etc. Breathing, exhaling gets rid of stuff that your body is finished with and wants to get out there. So, I would go with a fragrance-free product, one that is without the preservatives. If you were going to use a powder, it's important to use only cornstarch and avoid talc. Talc is unhealthy. A talc-based product is unhealthy to breathe in, so we want to avoid that. So, and in terms of using sunscreens, if people are using sunscreens and spending a lot of their lives inside between all the work we have to do and the TV people are watching and on the computer, etc., you may not have enough vitamin D. Our best source of vitamin D is the sun. So when we're inside all the time and when we use sunscreen the rest of the time, we're blocking our body's ability to activate vitamin D so it can work to make our bones strong. But also vitamin D has an important role in regulating normal cell growth. So you want to make sure that your vitamin D levels are normal. Your body's pretty efficient at making it if you have direct sun. It's the sunny months of the year, and even 15 minutes here and there throughout the week is enough to give you what you need. But if you're taking it through a supplement, it would be vitamin D3 you want to use. And you also want to, you can also get it from oily fish. That's another source of vitamin D to keep your bones strong. Other questions?
I'm a third-generation breast cancer survivor.
Wow.
With a bilateral mastectomy in January. My sister had the same surgery 5 years ago. My mother, my grandmother. So,
wow.
And we have not been BRCA tested.
You have not been?
Have not. So I called a doctor recently over, I think it was in Dartmouth-Hitchcock, who said, well, you need a mammogram. I'm thinking, I don't have any breasts, so how do you do it? I mean, what is a breast care after surgery? I guess is my question.
Okay.
And then number two is really more to do with the after. I have post-mastectomy pain syndrome, which is constant, and the resources seem to be few, though the website is fantastic.
Thank you.
But still not enough support given to that. So.
Okay, well, I really appreciate your question and your sharing. So, only 10% of breast cancers are due to one of those inherited genes called BRCA1 or BRCA2. And getting one of those genes just means that you're at higher risk. It doesn't mean you're going to get it. It's not like, Huntington's chorea, when you get the gene, you get the disease. So in order for a family that has breast cancer running through it, and maybe a breast cancer gene along with it, in order for breast cancer to form, other genetic changes have to take place. So, for example, in my family, there are various people who've been diagnosed. There was a breast cancer gene in my family, but I didn't get the gene. My mother didn't get the gene, but we both got breast cancer. Now, I could think back, what else happened in my life? As it turns out, in 1959, the year I was born, was the peak year in the use of DDT in this country. We now know that DDT exposure to a developing fetus can change the genes that will produce a higher risk of breast cancer way later in life. So there's this interaction between how you live your life and the risk of breast cancer. And in families that have breast cancer in various generations, particularly families with, let's say, an Ashkenazi Jewish background, it's more likely that there's a gene abnormality. And we do encourage people to seek genetic counseling to sort of know what's the lay of the land in your family, what the pedigree looks like. We call it pedigree. And then to have genetic testing to see if there's a gene abnormality, because it can help guide decisions, not just about the management here, but also there's a higher risk of ovarian cancer. So if there is a genetic abnormality present, it can guide your preventative care in other ways that are important in life. But still, after you choose, for women who have a strong family history or who have a known gene abnormality, they're at extra risk, and they may choose extra steps like mastectomies or like removal of the ovaries. The idea is to try to remove it before it has a chance to cause a problem. And then afterwards, you still need to be followed. So it's not it's not like you get rid of the breast, you get rid of all of the risk. You still need to be followed carefully over time, and really watching out that you are, physically active. So exercise 3 to 4 hours a week, 5 to 7 hours is better. To get your weight down to your ideal body weight and stick with it over time, really helping yourself, and reach out to resources to help you keep with the plan, stick with it over time. That's the hardest part. You want to restrict your alcohol use. The more you drink, the higher the risk. So the sort of rule of thumb is try to stick to 3 or fewer drinks per week. A drink is 12 ounces of beer, 5 ounces of wine, or 1.5 ounces of hard liquor. That's a drink. And, I would try to stay within 5. We say, 3 or fewer, but on those, special weeks where it's 4th of July coming up, or Christmas or New Year's, or you have your, reunion and everyone else is very happy, having a great time, and you want to have a great time too, then, bend the rules, don't make it ruin your life. But it's important to sort of, in general, stick to 3 or fewer drinks per week. And that will certainly help you with other things, including weight management, because alcohol and all the mixers that go with it have a lot of calories. And as soon as you drink, you get disinhibited, and you start eating a lot more. And you also function much better overall with yoga, with any physical challenge, if you haven't been drinking. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. And then you want to be able to buy your food, select the best foods for you within your budget, and prepare them in a way that's healthy. So you may be familiar with the Clean 15 list and the Dirty Dozen list from the Environmental Working Group. The Dirty Dozen includes those fruits and vegetables that have the highest exposure to pesticides when grown conventionally. And then the Clean 15 list, and by the way, this is, I think, on page 23 of the booklet that is available to you. The Clean 15 list are the 15 fruits and vegetables that are exposed to the least amount of pesticides when grown conventionally. So, when anything that's got like pretty much a thin skin, or that you want to have throughout the year, like an apple or a peach or berries and things like that, that's going to be on the Dirty Dozen list. So if you want those things, to buy those things from organic sources. When it comes to dairy products, our favorite is Stonyfield Farms. They are a partner to breastcancer.org. We have a whole organic living section. And the reason why we're working together is because we really trust their practices. So what it means to be organic in the dairy food industry is that there is never use of the chemicals that we're concerned about being exposed to. No, none of the hormones given to beef and dairy cattle. In this case, we're talking about dairy, but we can extend the conversation to beef cattle. So we want to avoid exposure to hormones that are given to beef and dairy cattle in this country, not in the European Union, in our country. In addition to that, when it comes to dairy, the cow's natural hormones can get into the milk that she makes. Any cow that's making a lot of milk, generally has higher levels of hormones. She's either pregnant right now or she's just been pregnant. Those hormones can get into the milk, and they tend to dissolve in the fat of the milk. So in the dairy industry, within the organic arena, what they do is they don't give the hormones to the cows, and they're not using all the antibiotics to cows that are grown in small space, that are raised in small spaces. And they also don't collect milk from the very pregnant cow. The second half of the pregnancy, they're not collecting milk from that animal. They're penned during that time. So if you stick to non-fat organic dairy products, then you're not going to get exposed to the hormone levels that we're concerned about. And Stonyfield's one of the only organic yogurts available, whereas the other ones that are marketed in an upbeat, natural way are not organic. So we feel pretty strongly about that. You can use other types of milks to sort of vary it up, almond milk, rice milk, soy milk. In general, we want you to use whole foods rather than have soy extracts as your source of protein. It's much better to have the whole food, the edamame bean, the tempeh, and tofu, and the soy milk is, that's a direct product just from squeezing out the edamame, and the tofu is just a curd of the soy milk, so that is considered pretty much a direct derivative of a whole food without much processing. So that's important. When it comes to, I'm preaching to the choir here in this shrine, but a vegetarian-based diet is the healthiest diet, including fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, spices, really learning about new cuisines that can really have a therapeutic effect, and having meat, fish, chicken occasionally if you have it at all. And I would only buy meat, red meat, that is either organic or 100% grass-fed. It's going to be much more expensive, but it's an occasional treat if you really are a carnivore. I have, 2 sons who just they're meat eaters. And I can lead by example all I want. They're going to want the meat. So I, do make sure that when I buy it from those sources. And when it comes to cooking, it's really important to stick to sort of stainless steel, glass, ceramic, enamel-covered metals, or cast iron, and not using plastic in the microwave, not using the nonstick surfaces, particularly at high heat, never using Teflon as surfaces, and in the microwave not to use glass. Glass is the best. Even a paper plate has a lot of junk in the paper, so but it's still better than cooking in plastic, all those microwavable things. That say microwave safe, it just means that the plastic's not going to melt. It doesn't mean that it's safe to eat food that comes from microwaving your food in that pack. But if you have children at home that want quick and easy something to eat, and it comes in a plastic microwavable thing, just pop it into like a glass bowl or a serving dish and cook it that way. Other questions? Yes.
Hi. My mother is a breast cancer survivor, and I am 32, and I have a 2-year-old girl and another one on the way. And so all of this feels very relevant and hopefully preventative. And when I think about my daughter, I think of all these things that you're talking about, cooking, bottles. We used plastic bottles for her for like a year, and then I just freaked out about it, and now we use stainless steel cups, and it's great. But is that, something, they all say BPA free, but as, some of my friends say, well, we don't know what else is in plastic. Right. Hence, it's still a little scary. So that's a question, is, are glass bottles just such a smarter way to go? And then also, for milk, you had mentioned fat-free organic milk. Was she still drinking whole milk? And she unfortunately doesn't really seem to drink grass-fed whole milk as well. What are your recommendations for that?
Okay, well, thank you. By the way, if some of the questions came up earlier, I would answer your personal questions at a later time so it could be more private. But to your situation, great that you're raising and bringing into the world strong women. We need them. And the fact is that most breast cancers don't run in families. So even if your mother had it, certainly doesn't mean you're going to get it. But the fact is that all women are at risk. Even the thin vegetarian yoga instructors that we see here, everyone needs to be concerned about this. And the other, sort of the multiplier effect is that, breast health equals women's health. So if you go out of your way, start, taking on one change at a time, getting good at it, getting more confident, taking on the next challenge, you will find that it becomes, a good habit that you get into, and one good habit leads to another. And your daughters are definitely going to be watching you, as are your peers. You've already pointed that out. They've been giving you unsolicited advice. So that's, by the way, how we build a movement, is to, take on one change at a time, feel some success at it, get good at it, the knowledge, which you may not have. That's why we at breastcancer.org are providing this information. And then going to other things. So a lot of our recommendations are based on what's called the precautionary principle, which basically means it's better to be safe than sorry. We don't know everything. And but we're trying to make the best recommendations based on what we know so far that's responsible. And when there are options and choices to be made out there, we're trying to help people make the best choice given what you have, what's accessible to you. So when it comes to the past, what you did, don't worry that you poison your children or that they're never going to they're going to suffer for their lives for what we did. The past is the past. We are moving forward. You have to embrace the future. And the body is very forgiving, particularly in kids. So in terms of bottles, I would use the glass bottles. I don't feel confident in plastic products. And when it comes to buying and storing food, I buy my food in jars. I also save all those jars and use them to store things. And I heat things up in those jars. And I also have that box pack that has like the glass bottom storage things with a plastic lid. And I don't overfill it so that the plastic lid doesn't touch the food. So, plastics are going to be part of our lives, so we can't, we just want to use them, in ways that we really need them. So if you are traveling and you're worried about the glass, they do have, lifefactory.com sells these glass bottles and glass water bottles with silicone external sleeves that protect them if they drop down. And I've dropped mine and I haven't broken them. I love that, my glass water bottle, because I reuse it. It cleans much better than a plastic would besides. And for a metal water bottle, I have those too, but you can't see on the inside. And, I kind of like to see that my water is clean and clear. Call me kooky, but that's just one of those things, I appreciate. So the other thing you can do is put a filter on your kitchen sink. Because a lot of the junk out in the water supply that is diluted out with municipal water treatment in general, you're going to get a low exposure to it unless you live in a place like West Virginia where there's not where you're really drinking out of the water table that is shared with a coal mine and places like that. But in general, there's a very low level of these things in the water supply. But there's stuff in the water supply. So just as an example, all the birth control pills that women use, they excrete it still in an active form. It goes in the water supply, and it's very stable in the water supply. So if you look at the fish populations right near the water treatment plants, that live in where the effluent comes out, where the water has already been processed and comes out, they have infertility problems. So in order to remove 99% of a lot of the chemicals that we're concerned about, you can put a activated charcoal filter in the underneath your kitchen sink. It's a one-time investment. You do have to change the filter every 6 months, but you just put it in the place where you're going to take the most drinking water from. So if you're mixing the bottle, then that would be your source of water for that. Municipal water tends to be cleaner than bottled water. Bottled water is not regulated. Municipal water is regulated. It's not regulated relative to the chemicals that could be in the water, but it's in general, but it is, you can still have low levels and still be, past the municipal water test. So that's why it's worth taking that step. Now, you can also use the Brita water filters, those pitchers. You can put the water through those and then put it, you can filter it through and then put it into a glass jar in the refrigerator or a glass pitcher. I don't have enough refrigerator space to have it for water, so I just bring the water from the tap. So that's just an example of what to do. When it comes to children and their neurologic development, there are a number of people who believe that your children need some fat in their milk, that non-fat milk for a developing child whose neurologic system is being built, there's a lot of myelin, a lot of fat that's packed in, that it may be that a 1% milk would be good. I would only give my children an organic milk, and I would, save, money from other places and put it to that.
Hi, what are your thoughts on fluoride?
Fluoride. It's a great question. We do not know the relationship between fluoride and breast cancer risk. So there doesn't seem to be an interaction. So I'm not an expert on that. There's not really a literature about that. But let's talk about a few other things. Let's talk about sleep, and let's talk about medical radiation, okay? Because these are relevant to, let's say you're traveling somewhere, it's you we're talking about, and you develop right lower quadrant pain and you go to the emergency room. It's important to ask for an ultrasound instead of a CAT scan. Particularly if it's our daughters, our developing daughters, who are 8 to 18, even into their early 20s, you want to stop and ask, stop and think before radiation is used. For example, radiation used to be used in the treatment of acne, and almost by definition, that's an adolescent person. Well, that increases the risk of breast cancer later in life. Your biggest medical exposure would be CAT scans, and a lot of times another form of diagnostic test could be used instead of a CAT scan to find out the answer. But if you need a CAT scan, you need a CAT scan. But I'm just saying, stop and ask first. If you're at the dentist's office and they want to do the whole Panorex thing, and they say you haven't had it for a while, really ask the question, is it necessary? How is it going to change what you do? How often do I really need to get it done? Are your shields checked? Because the shields need to be intact on the inside. You want to make sure that they are checked to make sure the lead panels on the inside are not cracked. That's just an example. So later on in life, when you're older and you're closer to the age of 40, when mammography is utilized as a very important screening modality for the early detection of breast cancer, it's safe to use. Mammograms involve a very teeny-weeny amount of radiation, much less than all these other things that are more often used. And by the time screening occurs, you're out of that vulnerable zone. But that's just an important thing to consider, is the radiation exposure issue. Therapeutic radiation for the treatment of breast cancer, it does not increase the risk of breast cancer on the other side later in life. That's a therapeutic intervention. If it was for the rare case of a young woman being diagnosed, let's say adolescent or early 20s with breast cancer, we would want to choose a different treatment modality for her than to use radiation. But later in life, it's considered a safe practice if it's necessary. Other questions?
I'm just curious, is only women get breast cancer, or can men get it too?
Thank you for asking that question. So men can also get breast cancer. So in the United States, in 1 year, there will be about 240,000 new cases diagnosed. And that number is increasing, by the way. And in men, there are about 2,000 new cases in the United States diagnosed each year. If a man is diagnosed with breast cancer, it's more likely to be associated with one of those breast cancer genes. Not always, but it's more likely to be. I take care of a number of men who are diagnosed with breast cancer, and they've been a real source of inspiration and a support for the organization. And just so you know, the incidence of breast cancer is expected to double in the next 30 years and happen in even younger women. And it's for different reasons around the world. For example, in India, the rate is rapidly increasing. And it's not because the women are drinking too much or using, hormone replacement therapy or birth control pills. And it's not because they're postponing pregnancy. And it's only partly in some populations due in part to the early puberty issue. But what's going on in India is that with prosperity, there's much more food and much more rich foods that are unhealthy, and the obesity epidemic is just escalating quickly in India, and particularly in the middle class. And it's a status symbol to say, look, there's food in my family. Look at us, we've got extra, and so there's that issue there. And also there's there's no awareness of early detection, and there's very few early diagnoses. Most women are diagnosed with later stages of disease. So it's a devastating illness in India, particularly when only 5% of people have health insurance, and mastectomies is sort of the rule of thumb. There's no reconstruction, and it's all still kept as a big secret. But there are huge environmental exposures in India, which help explain why it's more common, not just the obesity epidemic, because there's such pressure to feed so many people that they're using a lot of the industrial agriculture over there, and they're drinking water right off the very land that they're using the chemicals. So for even in the poor people who are having babies early and breastfeeding them and being physically active all day long, their risk is rapidly increasing. So we know that the environment has a major impact on breast cancer risk. But we are reassured, the good news is that changes you make today can really impact your risk tomorrow. Other questions? Yes.
Hi, you mentioned sleep. Could you talk
Yes,
about that?
thank you for reminding
and also
me.
Stress, the impact of stress.
Okay. So, the interesting thing is that the biggest risk for getting breast cancer, besides being a woman, is the wear and tear of everyday living. That's the aging effect. With every day of life, our cells experience insults from the interaction between the outside world and the inside world. Our body is very busy doing all kinds of things on the inside. And it is said at a molecular level that active cells will experience 1,000 hits a day. And you have the most elegant, sophisticated mechanisms in your body to repair that damage. But sometimes a mutation can persist and lead to a problem. It's sort of like active cells. It's sort of like if you had to wake up in the morning and copy, if you have a key, you copy the key, then you have to copy the key, then you copy the key, then you copy the key. And this keeps happening, and each time you copy a key, you know that it may not work to open the door. So, in the active living your everyday life, you can experience wear and tear of living, and you lean on the healing effects to heal the damage that occurred. Well, what happens as we grow older is we have more days of wear and tear, and our healing capacity is reduced as we age. That's part of what aging is all about, is our ability to heal is not quite as good. So as we live each day and make the choices that we have in front of us, it's very important to minimize the wear and tear emotionally and physically. So emotionally, the stress just wears down your system, increases inflammation, decreases your ability to heal, and just sort of takes, steals life from you at a cellular level. And then in terms of sleep is that time, that precious time we have as part of each day to restore ourselves to get ready for the next day. And that's when a lot of the healing occurs, naturally, normally, and necessarily so. And so it is really important to practice what's called, I don't know if you've heard the term, sleep hygiene. That's what medical doctors who specialize in sleep call it. How do you protect the precious sleep that you have each night? And it has to do with, avoiding chemicals that can interfere with your sleep. So if you like coffee, fine. But for me, for example, I can't drink coffee after noon because coffee has a long half-life, and it will stay in your body. And if let's say you collapse and you go to sleep, it's midnight, right? You're so tired that your body's fatigue overcomes the coffee effect. But once you sleep off some of that fatigue, the coffee effect that's still there will wake you up. So that's something that is within your control. It's also important to know that a lot of the teas that are out there have caffeine in them. So it's not just coffee. Of course, sodas. Mountain Dew is the highest level. Coke has caffeine. And if you're some of these people out there who's using the 5-hour energy drink, then obviously it's going to interfere with the quality of your sleep. During sleep, during darkness, there is melatonin, the night hormone. that comes out at night. And it helps you sleep. But it also has an important role at protecting normal breast cell growth. So it is important to make your bedroom dark at night. I got, curtains that have really thick linings, and it makes a huge difference in protecting sleep. It's also important to pee before you go to sleep, so you're not to minimize the number of times you're going to wake up to do so. You might not want to drink as much before you go to sleep in order to minimize the number of times you get up. Managing someone you might be sleeping with. What if you're sleeping with someone who snores, your partner snores? That can disrupt your sleep. You have to have a plan to manage that. Either he or she needs to roll on her side, she needs to get some help with the snoring, or he or she goes in another room, or you go in another room. Because you can develop sleep anxiety too, like anticipation. Like you can be sitting there, like you hear the first snore, it's like, oh shit, the first snore. I just hope that's it. And you're just like, please, please, please don't snore again. And then like you're just about to drift off and there comes the second snore, you're up again. And there you're just like waiting for it. It's not worth it. I leave the room. I have another place, a sanctuary. You have to have a backup plan for where you're going to sleep. There are natural, herbs that people claim will help with sleep. There's a whole section on breastcancer.org about how to protect your sleep, doing various things. If you're someone who gets anxious watching the news at 11 o'clock, don't watch the news. You get your news in the morning. There's plenty of other times to listen to all the bad stuff that's happening around the world. For sure, so many of the activities at Wanderlust are powerful tools that you can use to retrain your most powerful organ, which is your mind. And so to really understand how you find your safe places, how you handle anxieties, fears that can come creeping in. They're going to creep in, let them out the other door. How do you manage that? Meditation here. That the techniques that are used, they're just so powerful, so important and therapeutic. And if you're doing it already, you can learn new tricks. There's all kinds of things that you can do. Good sex is good for sleep. It has to be gratifying in order for it to be helpful for sleep. If you get into it and it's not gratifying, you're up being pissed off, or you're not, your body is sort of not satisfied. That's not good for sleep. You can learn how to manage that. I don't know about, there's many other classes here at Wanderlust that can help you get in the mood, make it enjoyable for you. Creating the mood, the burlesque class was awesome, just like getting your sexy back. I found that the Hypnotica was terrific in just really learning how to sort of rhythmically use your body in a way that is a great way to set up your night in a successful way, so you get the rest that you need. In general, when it comes to sex, being woken up early to have early morning sex is not generally what most women want who are trying to protect their sleep. So it means having a plan, like making a plan of when it's going to happen, and so not letting that happen. Unless it's a week, you compromise. So on a weekend, you can do that and go right back to sleep. So these are, you have to make your, make your deals so that the world goes around in a harmonious fashion. Other questions? Yeah.
I just have a quick question. You had mentioned birth control, and I was wondering if there are any other medications that can contribute long term.
So, the old-fashioned birth control pills, and even some of today's preparations, the ones that tend to be higher in dose, were associated with a higher incidence of breast cancer when taken for an extended period of time. We don't yet know the safety and potential danger of today's use of birth control pills, which is millions and millions and millions of people taking birth control pills for many reasons other than just contraception. Better skin, to be regular, to manage PMS, to be hip, to be ready, to be cool, to have bigger breasts. Some women like that as a side effect. And I am concerned about that. We don't yet know the public health impact of this. So I invoke the precautionary principle. Better to be safe than sorry. Find a non-hormonal, effective form of birth control. The Paragard IUD, for example, is one of the most commonly used forms of birth control used in the European Union. It does not involve hormones. It is much safer than the old-fashioned IUD. You don't need to take a pill each day. Because, when you think about the pill, is that even though the pills today are lower in dose, they're still high enough in dose to overcome your body's own internal natural system and hijack it. So, it is true, though, just so you know, that 5 years of taking birth control pills is protective against the risk of ovarian cancer. That's 5 years, either continuously or added together, summated. So if you are younger in life and you have different partners, you don't know when you're going to need to have birth control, you're not going to, bring a diaphragm around. A lot of people don't even know what that is. A lot of us old goats use that. But when you want to be ready, and then the birth control pill, let's say college, high school, college, first job, part of your life, fine, use it then. It's not going to increase your risk of breast cancer in a measurable way, and it will protect you against ovarian cancer. But then over time, switch off to something like the Paragard IUD, and that will help. Okay, well, listen, I invite any comments or any suggestions. We're, again, thrilled to be part of Wanderlust this year. I think for anybody who has encountered any challenge to her health, any person who loves us, who's concerned about us, wants to help us get better. And this is a terrific opportunity for people to learn all kinds of new things to make life much richer, more exciting, more fun, more meaningful. So we're thrilled to be here. And I think that for everybody I take care of and for the 12 million people that depend on us at breastcancer.org, that what you're accomplishing through Wanderlust is a very rich university of new experiences. So thank you very much for that. And thank you for your wonderful questions and your participation. And if anyone has any individual questions that they'd want to ask in a more private setting, I'm open to that too. Thank you very much.